Apple products are known to suffer from less depreciation than most other pieces of consumer tech, especially laptops. Go on eBay, look up a laptop that's just a couple years old, and you'll find that their values have absolutely plummeted. But for the longest time, that was not true in the world of Apple. You could buy a $2,000 machine, keep it for 5 years, and still get half your money back. And now with the release of the new 15-inch MacBook Air, which you guys know I absolutely adore, things have gotten pretty bad for a certain segment of MacBook buyers. I'm talking about the 2019 15 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. And man, if you bought one of these, you took a massive bath. It's not hard to see why either. I've had both of these machines off for about 15 minutes. Let's see how long it takes for them both to wake from sleep. So the MacBook Air is on instantaneously, and the Intel finally wakes up. The days of Apple Silicon are pretty great, but that's not the point that I want to make in today's video. The point that I want to make is what an absolute shame it was that this 16-inch MacBook Pro came out when it did. It's kind of similar to the Intel Mac Pro that came out also in 2019 and has also basically just been sitting around waiting to get replaced, and then they replaced it and the replacement isn't very good, but I gotta pay for it. So today's video is sponsored by Pulseway, the ultimate tool to keep your server or laptop deployment running from anywhere. With Pulseway, all the IT tools you need are at your fingertips, from health monitoring to remote system access to automating repetitive tasks. Pulseway gives you the freedom to keep tabs on your system from anywhere in the world. To get started with Pulseway and learn more about transforming your IT tasks, check out the link in the description below. Big thanks to Pulseway for sponsoring, and now let's get back to the video. Obviously, we all know that Apple Silicon is incredible, but there was a time where this was an incredible computer too. In November of 2019, Apple released what was then a major update to the aging line of Touch Bar MacBook Pros that were extremely controversial. See, 2019 was the end of an era for Apple. They finally acknowledged that the butterfly keyboard MacBook was a mistake, and this 16-inch was heralded as a massive, massive upgrade. I mean, you have to keep in mind that we were talking about a period of time where everyone was making fun of Apple for thermal throttling and their performance was a fraction of what competitors had to offer. This 15-inch would have set you back $4,000 if you bought it new. It's got the upgraded Core i9, a terabyte of storage, 32 gigs of RAM, and the Radeon Pro 560X, which ironically was already a very old and pretty weak chip. So when Apple launched the 16-inch MacBook Pro, it was amazing. I had very, very positive coverage of this thing because they had much more powerful graphics chips. They had a much better cooling solution, so even though the CPUs were the same, they performed better. And on top of that, we got a larger display, and the thicker chassis for better cooling allowed for both a normal, actually usable keyboard and better battery life. So this thing was an absolute steal when it came out in 2019. But it only lasted about 6 months because then Apple announced that they were transitioning to Apple Silicon, and all of a sudden, this was a dinosaur. And I gotta just say, I feel bad for the team that worked on this because you just know that a lot of engineering and years of work went into making a very solid device, but it just came out at the very, very end. It's like building the fastest ocean liner in 1951, and then a year later, there's commercial jets that can do it in 7 hours. Now, to be fair, I'm not at all complaining about Apple Silicon. It's just very funny as someone who bought this machine brand new, spent $3,500 on it, and now you go on eBay, you look up these things, it's not great. I mean, look at these sold listings on eBay for MacBook Pros with the Core i9 9th gen. So these are gonna be devices that came out in 2019. And right off the bat, you can see this is the $200 upgraded Core i9, $400 of RAM, $1,000 of SSD, and another $800 worth of GPU upgrade, and that sold for $1,569. That MacBook Pro would have cost you more than $5,000 just 3 years ago, and now it's $1,500. This one sold for $570? What? They put their Amex on it? What? The description says this computer is basically brand new, never used much. It's a toy. Biggest big boy MacBook on market. Okay, I think this might be a scam. This is the only item this seller's ever sold. Look, here's another one, 64 gigs of RAM. That was like $1,000 upgrade at 1,700 bucks. Here's one for less than $1,000, 954, 580, 800, 840, 770. That did not used to happen. I just need you guys to understand that. I used to make videos in like 2018 where I would go out and buy a 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro, and if it was under $1,000, that was a good deal back then. To buy a 3-year-old MacBook Pro that cost 2,500 bucks for 40% of its original price, you were doing well. And very frequently, those 2015s would sell for $1,500 if they were in really good condition. So this is unprecedented. To have a $3,000+ machine under $1,000 in 3 years, that just hasn't happened in the past decade plus. But you know what's even crazier than that? I wouldn't buy a single one of these. You can keep on scrolling for pages and pages of listings. None of these really appeal to me, quite frankly. Like someone here spent $720 to get the upgraded Core i9, upgraded RAM, and the highest end graphics tier apart from the Vega option. Like, yeah, sure, that's well spec'd, but I would not pay 700 bucks for a butterfly keyboard. That's the craziest thing, is not only are these things worth less than a third of their original price, it's that they're still a bad deal. That's crazy. How did this happen? Well, if you take a step back and look at it, it's actually pretty easy to see how we got here. Because if we line up all three of these computers, 2019 15-inch, 2019 16-inch, both with 8-core i9s, and then we have the M2 15-inch MacBook Air. That's Apple's least powerful MacBook right now, by the way. Line them all up, run Cinebench. What do you find? The 2019 15-inch and the new M2 MacBook Air scored identical. Identical. Now the 16-inch did do a little bit better here, 8,700 compared to 8,200, but that is a very negligible difference, and that's only here in this quick Cinebench test. The more crazy fact is that when I ran Cinebench 3 times, that's 30 minutes of maxing out the CPU, the 15-inch MacBook Air was at 84% battery. That's something that we've gotten used to, but the 16-inch MacBook Pro was at 40%. The 15-inch was at 28% battery. That's insane. And before you say, oh, well, your computers are old and the batteries aren't worn out, no, they're not. Because I barely had a chance to use that 16-inch MacBook Pro because almost immediately Apple Silicon came out and I stopped using it. I do feel bad for, well, me, because I bought one of those in 2019. That was a mistake. Now, if I'm someone who got stuck with one of these 16-inch MacBook Pros and I decide that I want to get out of this thing, I want to just trade it in and move on, get on the Apple Silicon bandwagon, well, good luck with that. Apple's only going to give me $675 for this, which means that after 3 years, my $3,500 MacBook is only halfway to a MacBook Air. Oof! Yeah, that is mega super rough, but it actually gets even weirder because somehow, inexplicably, Apple Silicon is depreciating way faster than you would think too. I mean, look at these sold listings for Apple Silicon MacBook Pros. Here's a 16-inch with 1 terabyte, an M1 Max, and 32 gigs of RAM for $1,700. That just sold today. Here's a 14-inch that sold for just $1,100, and below it you can find excellent so-called refurbished ones selling for $1,300. And that is really crazy. I would have thought that Apple Silicon would have held its value a lot better, especially considering that the M2 isn't like a huge upgrade. It's certainly not as big as going from Intel to Apple Silicon. So that is a very, very weird thing to see. Now that's good news or bad news depending on your position. If you have an M1 Pro machine and you want to upgrade to M2 Pro, it's probably a bad thing because that's going to be pretty expensive. But if you're still on Intel or you have like an M1 MacBook Air that you're looking to upgrade, well, congratulations. You can get an amazing 14-inch MacBook Pro with the mini LED display, plenty of performance, storage, and RAM for like $1,300. That's a crazy good deal. So yeah, overall, I definitely feel bad for those of us who bought these 2019 16-inch back when they came out. We really took a bath, but they were great for about 4 months. I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Is there any scenario in which you would consider buying one of these older MacBooks? How cheap would it have to be for you to consider it? And of course, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.